Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, guys, DLC 6. This is, from my point of view, a highly possible scenario for the next DLC after the 23rd Tournament of Power. We are talking about the return of Cooler, the revenge of Cooler, and there's a couple of reasons why this could be the possibility, guys. In the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, we need to look at what has happened in the Season Pass 2 so far, and also the features which were part of the game. So, first and foremost, we got the story of Bardock, which kind of takes us back in the past before Goku was born, so as in the events pre-Dragon Ball. Then we have, obviously, the events of the Dragon Ball at the end of Dragon Ball in the 23rd Budokai Tenkaichi, which is gonna happen in DLC 5, and that leads us really nicely in the next one, which would be the return of Cooler. And the reason why I believe this is highly possible, at least to a certain extent, is because this particular movie is also a 45 movie, same as Bardock effectively. And in this one, you are fighting against a ton of mobs, as you guys know, the clone of Metacooler. And this one is quite an interesting one. I mean, this is, I guess, the main villain, so he creates clones of his body by using the personality of Cooler, right? And this is what's quite interesting, because if you guys remember in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot in the Bardock DLC, the mob battles were quite common, as in the mob battles where you have to fight against lots of mobs. So this would go really well with the return of Cooler, because in the Cooler DLC, sorry, in the Cooler movie, you have a lot of clones which you have to fight against, and they're quite powerful against, against Goku and Vegeta, and have to, like, exceed their limits. A second reason why this would make sense is because we've seen that they don't really want to go beyond Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z in the DLCs so far. I highly doubt it's gonna be GT, because that's too much of a jump skip, especially by going back all the way in the past. They're not gonna just jump all the way to the end of Dragon Ball Z and then just go to Dragon Ball GT. I just see it unlikely. I mean, it could happen, that's obviously a possibility, but I just don't see that really happening at this point in time. Now, fights wise, there's a lot of fights happening here, because we have that, when this starts, you have, if you watch, I actually rewatched the special myself again, and lots of the characters from the Dragon Ball, like Piccolo, Krillin, they fight on Planet Namek, Vegeta, Goku, Gohan, Kid, which is really cool. So there's a lot of things happening here, because this is just after the events of the Frieza saga. So because of that, we have here the following fights. So first we have Piccolo battles the Cyclopean guards, and then we have Goku and Vegeta battle against Metacooler. Then we have Goku crash landing after defeating Metacooler Core. So it's obviously, lots of different fights there. There's also, like, I think a fight where Gohan, I believe he fights also against some of the Cooler. So it's really cool, because you have all these options here, all these fights, and the mob battle, which is kind of like a big thing part of the DLC, because we've seen that the mob battles in which, you have a character fighting against like hundreds of enemies is been repeating itself over the last DLCs. I mean, it wasn't since the DLC with the Golden Frieza, it was kind of repeating itself endlessly, because it's an easy way to add content to the game, which makes sense. Now, another interesting thing is, because of course in the Budokai Tenkaichi 23rd tournament, they're actually gonna bring what's called the ground battle combat. Now, in the ground combat, this is an example of some screenshots. This could also be actually added to the actual DLC, which we see here that, in lots of combat here is happening on the floor, as you can see here. So just imagine for a second you get overwhelmed by like a bunch of enemies. They all attack you on the floor, on the ground, as you can see here in this one. And then you have to fight them on the floor, and there's like raw mechanics and stuff like that. So again, it would just play so well into it. Like, there's lots of different things here which would go really well with this particular DLC, especially in terms of the combat, in terms of the mechanics. I mean, here, for example, here, right? I mean, lots of the actions which are happening in this particular DLC were happening on the ground. The ground combat here was quite visible, okay? So because of that, because the ground combat was visible, again, it's very easy for them to kind of transpose that from the DLC 5 to the DLC 6 and give us this particular Cooler DLC. Now, of course, guys, remember, this is 100% speculation. This is not me telling you that this is gonna happen, because, obviously you don't know what's gonna really happen, you don't know what's gonna be there, nobody really knows. I mean, this is just purely a particular speculation based on the fact that there's quite a lot of evidence amounting to the fact that the DLCs for this particular season 2 are really focused on just, I would say, the original story of Dragon Ball. And of course, like Dragon Ball Z, but not really going all the way to the GT because we're not ready yet. I mean, it could be that they will release potentially a Season Pass 3, for example, right? Just for example, in which one they could be exploring like stuff like GT, they could be exploring stuff like Broly. I mean, there's lots of opportunities there basically to play with that, right? Which is really cool. But guys, that's it for today's video on Dragon Ball Z Kakarot DLC 6. I cannot wait, to be honest. I mean, this is gonna be so exciting, and I fully believe that this right now is at least about 40% possible, which is quite high. I believe it's even higher than right now the GT, and it's even higher than Broly, to be honest, just because lots of the mechanics, lots of the fights happening here go really well with the mechanics we already have in the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot in the previous DLCs. So guys, that's it for today's video on this one. Let me know in the comments, what do you believe? Do you believe this is a possibility? Do you believe that this is actually, you know, plausible or not? I believe that is very possible, guys. And as always, I shall see you later in the next upload.